been going to a lot of events recently, and so I've done a lot of small talk over the past few weeks. And what I've noticed is that consistently there are two topics that come up. The first, of course, is the weather. The second is around how kids are just growing up so differently these days. And people are feeling like kids are less resilient and less curious and less creative. And why is that? And what are we doing about that if we're recognizing this as an issue? Hello and welcome to Creativity Uncovered. My name is Abby and I'm on a journey to uncover how everyday people find and use creative solutions at home, work, play, and everything in between. And my goal for this podcast is that by the end of it, you will be armed with a whole suite of tried and tested ways to summon creativity the next time that you need it. So today, I'm very excited to be speaking with Gavin McCormack, who is an award-winning educator. He's the co-founder of Upschool, and he's a Montessori Australia ambassador. So welcome, Gavin.
Hello. Yes, welcome. Sounds good. Giving away all these wonderful tips and tricks to parents and teachers and everyone around the world. I think you're onto something there.
Well, I'm hoping you can help me with that.
Maybe. Let's see. Because
I am a curious person, and when people say there's not curiosity in the next generation, it absolutely kills me because I think that's such a beautiful thing. But I don't have kids myself. I'm experiencing this through my nieces and nephews and obviously all the small talk at events, which everyone loves to talk about. But I want to know from you, is there a different childhood now? Are kids actually experiencing a different childhood to say what you or I grew up with?
I think the first thing to say is that change is the only constant, right? So let's just make sure that we know about that everything is destined to evolve. It's destined to change. If you think about in Victorian times, there was a lady who walked around the streets in Yorkshire in England, and her job was to wake up the miners or the people who worked in the factory so they weren't late for work. And there was no alarm clock. So she had a pea in a little bit of bamboo and she'd fire it up at their windows, she's called a pea shooter, and it would wake them up and they'd pay her a shilling and off would go to the factory, right? And then around came the alarm clock and everyone said, oh my God, this is the end of the world. These people are out of a job. They won't be able to do it. And suddenly we evolved. We managed to cope with the fact that alarm clocks came into our world. So evolution of everything is constant, and change is something that we have to live alongside. So we can't be scared of it. What we do need to be mindful of is how these changes affect us and ultimately affect our children, because our children look at us, when they want to learn how to live. There's a very famous quote from Montessori: model the behavior you wish to view in those around you. And what it means is, if you want to teach your children, just be what you want them to be, and they will become that. The words that you say really don't matter. Only 7% of all communication is words. The rest is body language, actions, intonation, and your actions. So, yes, children are living in a different world now, but as long as we know what's happening, we can adjust to make sure that no harm is coming to them and that they're getting the best experience ever.
Yeah. So it's not all doom and gloom. There is something we can do about it.
100%.
But perhaps just talking about it at these events is not the right way to go.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It's definitely not all doom and gloom. But, as we go through this conversation over the next half an hour, I'll share some interesting statistics, some stark numbers with our listeners. And I think when you know. That's it. If you don't know, well, you can't be blamed. But as soon as you know, then on your head be it. If you know, then you know. So you can't take that away. Once it's in, right? So
yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll have, a few conversations enlightening people so they can actually move on from the conversation to actually taking action if it is a concern for them.
Agreed.
But you mentioned Montessori, and you are an ambassador for Montessori. Some people may not have heard what that is. What is Montessori?
Wow. How long have we got? Okay, so we'll do it in 2 minutes. We'll do it in 2 minutes. So Montessori, obviously, many people have heard about it now since a lot of influential people send their children now to Montessori schools. But it was invented 150 years ago by Maria Montessori. She was the first woman to graduate from university in Italy. And she was ostracized by Mussolini at the time. And so she had to leave Italy and flee. And she went to India and became friends with Gandhi and stayed there. And in her time she was a psychologist, a doctor, an educator, a very observant woman. She noticed that if you leave children alone and don't get involved, they just learn automatically, inherently. They just learn. And then she decided, well, education really needs minimum input from the adults around. You just need to kind of guide them into an environment where it's set up and conducive for learning to happen independently. And then you just watch them and you watch them learn in front of you. And it's true. It's 100% true. So I was a mainstream teacher. I then went into Montessori education and retrained. And it's just phenomenal what happens. If anyone listening to this who's seen children who you leave them with a piece of wood, some cardboard and a couple of pencils, and suddenly they've got a classroom and a telephone and they're talking to the piece of wood and having a conversation with a fictional character, and they've made this whole world up in their own mind. That is amazing. And it's so good for learning, so good for growth, all of this. But unfortunately, in the world we live in now, we feel and we think that we need to keep them constantly entertained, constantly stimulated, and constantly busy. And actually, that's the exact polar opposite of how the brain likes to learn. The exact opposite. We'll talk about that in a second. But what Montessori does, it basically sets up environments where everything is ready and it's conducive for learning, guides the children into this journey, and then takes their hands away and lets them go and just watches what happens. And then what you get a classroom or a school environment which is very similar to what's happening outside in the real world. Because if you think about, the average classroom on the planet, this isn't everybody. It's sitting in rows facing the front. Mr. Johnson tells you facts, you write them down, you copy from a textbook, you fill in a diagram, and then you get a test, and then well done, you got 10 out of 10, and you know about volcanoes. You don't know about volcanoes, unfortunately. And there's no independence in that. There's no real learning has happened. In fact, if you teach like that and learn like that, that night when the children go to bed, the brain will just dissolve those facts because they can get facts very quickly and very easily. And the spoken word is something that the brain doesn't really hold on to. Your brain has about 2.5 petabytes of storage. That's enough to store 400 years of 4K streamed video. Okay. Oh. But it has no idea how much storage it has. It's not aware of that. So it's very efficient. So it doesn't want to keep anything that's really not going to be beneficial. It will just get rid of it. So every night when your children go to bed, and same for me and you, Abby, when we go to bed, and this is why sleep is so important. You literally learn nothing while you're awake. 0. 100%. You learn it all when your eyes are shut. And your brain does something amazing. It's called synaptic pruning. And it's like somebody with a pair of scissors and they're trimming a bonsai tree. Your brain does this, right? Okay, Abby's asleep. She's fast asleep. Let's sort out all the information that she learned today. Let's get rid of the stuff that we don't need or we can learn very easily elsewhere. And let's keep the stuff that might be conducive to staying alive. Basically, the brain is designed to keep you alive. And it's called synaptic pruning. So it goes through all the 7,000 thoughts, which is an average person has per day, and decides keep or bin. And it cuts the synapses of those things that it can learn very easily again tomorrow. So if you are a teacher or a parent who's just saying words to kids, I'm going to say loads of stuff to you, and you're going to write it down. And then you're going to remember it for Friday. By Friday, there's not a lot of learning that's taken place. In fact, they won't remember hardly anything. It's not their fault. The lymphatic system has just dissolved all the information because it's just not relevant. But if you can attach an emotion to that learning, and how do you get an emotion? Well, you add risk. How do you add risk? You give a choice. You say, okay, guys, now we're going to learn about volcanoes, but I'm going to let you choose how you represent your learning. You can do a diagram, a model, a dance, a show, a painting, whatever you want. All the stuff's in the room. You can work with whoever you like on the floor, standing up at a table of 4, a table of 2, a table of 1. You've got 45 minutes. That's all you've got. And then you're going to present what you've learned to us and you're going to teach us. Now, you think about all the emotions in that. Suddenly, who am I going to work with? What's going to work best for me? Which way do I want to represent my work? There's a risk there. Choice. Will it work? Well, can I do it in 45 minutes or not? So then 45 minutes is up and they come to the carpet. It could be a week, could be 2 weeks, could be a month, depending on the school or the age of the children. The children come and present their work. What have they done? So with all the choice comes freedom. With freedom comes risk. With risk comes emotion. Now, when you have an emotion attached to learning, the brain says, oh, there's a feeling here. It never, ever gets rid of feelings, because feelings are really important for keeping you alive. You know, if I go near a lion and I feel scared, you better keep that. Don't go near lions again. That's really bad. Like, stay away from those guys. Put the hand in a flame. It's hot. Keep that information to put it in the hippocampus. So say the words and it will be dissolved, almost guaranteed. Add some choice and freedom and it will be kept and will be retained. So what Montessori does is it adds that element of choice all day, every day, nonstop. So then you have this learning, which is like, it's totally embedded. The children are like, okay. And it's a lot better for the teacher too, because suddenly your children work independently. You don't need you anymore. You're like, hey, I can just watch. And what you do is you then watch all of these skills taking place. Oh, look at that over there. Leadership, negotiation, compromise, communication. All this stuff is happening that you never, ever get to see unless you let them go. And I could talk all day and I won't, but I hope you get the gist of it.
Yeah. This is we're talking about in a schooling context here, that the less active instruction and stuff that the teacher has means there's more freedom for the kids to be able to explore it that way. Is that sort of what's happening in like kids' lives now, is that we're just getting too actively involved and not leaving them enough space to be able to make those choices and explore that way?
100%. Think about it. Think about after-school activities, clubs, right? And I've been a principal of a school for several years, and I've worked in schools all my life. Quite often, and parents who are listening to this will definitely know, you know, that one of the hardest things to manage in a week is who's going to drop the kids where, pick them up, drive them to this, that, and the other all week. Now, you don't have kids, and neither do I, but I know how it works. You've got football club, hockey club, music club, practice. You've got a play date. You've got this, you've got that, and the other. Parents become Uber drivers for most of the free time that they've got, because they're continuously dropping kids everywhere and taking them to stuff, because it's now the new norm. There's all this stuff filling the calendar after school that there is no free time. There's no space. And when you have space, something else happens. So, I mean, let's go into that. So when you have space, I call it the educational void, whatever you want to call it, right? Free time, choice, whatever you want to call it. When you have space and free time, and let's say that you get bored, there's no stimulus in front of you, right? There's no games, there's no apps, there's no iPad, there's no TV, there's no one telling you what to do. You're just there, and you're like, okay, well, what do I do now with this time? The brain loves learning all day. It just wants to learn everywhere. So suddenly it will come alive. And it goes into something called the DMN. It's called the default mode network, right? And when you're not doing anything, your brain just slips into this place called the DMN. Now, for any adults listening, you will probably access this twice a day, unless you're into meditation and mindfulness, twice a day. When you're in the shower in the morning, and if you hear people, they have so many good ideas in the shower. They solve problems in there. Oh my God, I've just had it. That's right. I'm going to do that thing, or I've got an idea for a book. It's in the shower, right? And it's because in the shower, there's no stimulus. There's nothing. Just in there, you're washing your hair, you're cleaning your body. Your mind is completely able to just slip into the DMN like this. Now, another time is when you're driving home from work. You've driven home 1,000 times down that same road. And you get home and you think, I don't remember driving home. Did I run anybody over or run a red light? You've had it. I've had it. Everyone has it. Your brain does this amazing thing where it goes, look, you've been down this road 1,000 times. I can see everything looks the same as it always is. You go in the DMN, you solve some problems, do some critical thinking, make synaptic connections in there, and I will keep my eye on the road. And if anything's different than it was last time, I'll wake you up. Don't stress. So suddenly there's roadworks and they weren't there for the last 1,000 times. And the brain goes, right, back in the room. And you're back and you're concentrating again. Now, it doesn't mean you're not concentrating at the first time. But when you think about our children, because we're keeping them so busy the whole time, they never have a chance to go into the DMN, because they come home, then it's chores, now it's an app, now it's a play date, now it's reading, now it's time for this, now it's time for that, now it's time for bed. When was the chance when you got to be creative and connect all those synapses and all that learning that you've had before and have that deep critical thinking with creativity? It's not there. And so we have to be really conscious as adults who are guiding our students to not stimulate them the whole time, to say it's okay if there's nothing to do. Like, just completely leave them be, almost with nothing, and watch what happens. And there's so much research on this about what happens when we give people nothing to do. They come up with the greatest ideas. And if you think about, I think it was Thomas Edison who invented the light bulb. In the afternoon, he'd go to sleep on his sofa, right? And he would just sit on the couch, and underneath his arm, he'd have a handful of steel ball bearings. Underneath his arm, he'd have a steel pot. And he'd lie on the couch, and he'd just try to go to sleep. And when he was about to drift off, which is also when you go into the DMN, just as you're about to go into sleep, we all have that really creative moment before you fall asleep, and you think you've been asleep for 7 hours, but you've only been asleep for 2 minutes. Yeah. And he would, as he fell asleep, his hand would relax, he'd drop the ball bearings into the pot, it'd wake him up. And he, in his documented autobiographies and all the interviews he had, that's when he had all his greatest ideas of the light bulb, and all this stuff was just in that flash of a moment. If we don't let our kids go into that space, or we don't go into that space, we never get to solve the world's biggest problems. And it's very important.
Yes. Wow, that's so interesting. I've never heard that story about Thomas Edison. But I think the idea of that space that you're talking about, the DMN, that's so true. So many people on this podcast have spoken about that when they're struggling with a creative problem or some type of thing, they allow the mind to go off it, then it solves itself almost. Yeah. And so, I think the idea of allowing kids to be bored is a really interesting one. But what's hard about that, I think, is that from my experience of looking after, nieces and nephews and things like that, let them have the free play, but as soon as the device comes out, they are so interested in that. And that would surely stop any type of creative play happening.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you tackle that?
Well, interesting. If you talk to someone like Professor Mark Williams, he's the MIT, he's the head honcho, the big gun of neuroscience. He'd say, get that iPad and smash it into 1,000 pieces, put it in the bin and never take it out again. And I can't disagree with him. If you think about, they're designed to get you addicted. That's it. They're designed to get you hooked. Every single app on your smartphone, on your iPad is designed to make you want to come back over and over again. It gives you a hit every time. It says, come back to me, come back to me. Notifications, all this stuff. But if you don't want to go cold turkey, it's very hard, then there's a couple of really simple tips that I would share with your listeners. The first one is, if you want your children to follow a new rule, let's say you've gone way too far and they have their iPad, like 5 hours a day, or, they're on their phone in bed and all this terrible stuff, which we know is really bad, right? If you want to change the rules, you can. But if you don't follow them, your children will not follow them. So if you say, by the way, I've realized that, the iPad is taking away a lot of the time that we get to spend together. And here's a couple of things about what it's doing to our brains, not yours, ours. So we want to make a new rule. And you're allowed to say this at any time, especially to young children. And there's a new rule. Here's the new rule. The iPad's only allowed between 6 and 6:30 for all of us. Every single person in the house. No phones in the bedroom from now on. In fact, maybe we put our phones in this basket on the way in the house and they turned off and everyone does it. Now, if you want your kids to follow suit, you've got to do it yourself. It's got to be a household rule. They will do what you do. And, the most common phrase with children ever in the history is it's not fair. And the reason I say it's not fair is because it actually isn't fair. You say to them, I want you to be a grown-up. I want you to be mature. Why are you acting so immature? Help me with the chores. Do this, do that. La, 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 la. But when it comes to rules, I have one set and you have another one, because actually I'm up here and you're down there. Kids go, well, this is not consistent. You're not being consistent with me. On one hand, you're saying be mature. On the other hand, you're saying that you have different rules to me. So this is not fair. If you make it fair, you've got more of a chance of them coming on board with you, because they want to be you. They want to copy you. They want to mimic you. You have the biggest influence. They have a neuron called the mirror neuron, and it basically is designed to copy you. If they trust you, they'll copy you. That's it. Just a fact. Copy if you trust. That's it. So if they trust you, and they will do if you've got a strong connection with your own kids, and you hug them and tell them you love them and hold their hand and put them to bed and spend time with them, they trust you. And if they trust you, they mimic you. They have no choice. Their brain is designed to do that. So that's the first one. If you're going to make a new rule, make sure the rule implies to you as well. Number two, if you want to limit the amount of screen time they have, you just have to stick to your guns. So you say, look, we're going to have screens. It's okay. When I was a kid, I had a what was it called? A Master System, a Sega Master System. Me and my brothers played it together. But we had a hard limit. The time was, it's 6 till 7. And at 7, on the dot, when that clock goes tick, my dad would come in and unplug it straight away. And there was no, I'm in the middle of a level. I'm just about to get to a baddie. I'm just about to defeat this baddie at level 6, Dad. We knew that bang on, as when that second hand ticked onto 7, the power went off straight away. Now, we cried and we tried, and we were like, but Dad, it's not fair. The other kids at school get to play for longer. My dad was like, tears mean nothing to me. I know you still love me, and I'm doing it because I love you. And the kids aren't going to not love you anymore, even if they go, I hate you, you're the worst parent in the world. They don't mean it. All they're doing is, can I get another minute out of this guy? Where's the line here? Because kids, all they want to do is find out, where are the boundaries? Like, just tell me where they are. They love boundaries so much. They love rules. They love showing the limits. But if you want an easy life, you've got to stay strong. You've got to stick to that limit very hard. You've got to be punctual. If you give them a minute, because there's a tier, crocodile tier, you give them till 6:01, 7:01, whatever it is, then in their brain they go, you know what? Weak. These guys are weak. And I am going to take them down tomorrow. I'm getting 5 minutes. I'm going to stomp tomorrow. I might even push something off the table. I might stamp my feet. And then, maybe give them 5 minutes. Then that's it. It's game over for you. They've got another hour. The next month they've got an hour, and suddenly you can't take it back. So, although it's hard and you don't want to see your kids cry, they're not really sad. They're not really sad. They're just, all they want to know is, show me where the line is. And if you can hold strong, then you're all good. But unfortunately, they're very manipulative, these guys, because they're designed to be. They're designed to do that. That's what the rules are.
It sounds like you've had a lot of experience with that. I'm thinking
God.
My time, I originally actually trained as a teacher as well, that you need to be so consistent with your rules and following through. And it sounds like parents need to do that as well. It sounds like there's a lot of influence that parents can have on their kids in this space. And there's this link between, I guess, being creative and being bored. What is that? What's the link between boredom and creativity?
Well, the link is really evident. When you're bored, your brain goes, let's go and be creative now. And what it does, it goes into your prior learning, into your hippocampus, where all of your old learning, and just connects things together, just makes synaptic connections. And so that's where critical thinking and creativity lies. It sits right there. So if you don't have boredom, creativity is going to be very hard to find. A tip for any parents too, is a really good one, is if you want to be creative, you just go for a walk every day and walk the same route. Even it doesn't matter how boring, because your brain goes, well, I've been down this path before. You walk around the block, maybe half an hour. By the time you get back, you've come up with so many new ideas, because your brain's been you're in the DMN for 29 minutes. And then when you get back to the house, you're like, oh, wow, I don't remember where I stood. I wasn't looking at the pavement. Did I stand on a puppy or walk into the road? No, you didn't do any of those things. But yeah, the link is very clear. If you have times of absence when you're not continuously stimulated, you'll be creative. Look at any of the most creative minds in the world, and that's exactly how they got all their ideas, is doing exactly that. That's where mindfulness comes in, and meditation, having time to sit still and think, and you just not do anything, which is very hard to do. Meditation is very hard to do. I find it very hard, but I don't find it hard to go for a walk around the same route I've been before. I don't find that hard. That's easy. So there's other ways we can get into the DMN instead of continuously having to meditate and sit with our legs crossed with incense burning and looking at a shrine. Although that's also nice.
Yeah. So that's sort of how we can do it for ourselves. How do we do that for our kids though? Like, how do we nurture that ability to be bored and then turn that towards creativity rather than lashing out or destruction, which if you're not used to being bored, you can turn either way, really. How do we nurture them in the right direction?
There's a lot of research around overstimulation when it comes to harmony. So I don't know the exact research, but I have read it. So I'll just give you an insight. So if you had a room filled with 100 different toys, right, or a room filled with 4 toys, and you put children in these rooms and you left them to their own devices, the children with the 4 toys would be way more creative than the ones with 100. What happens is the ones with 100 just switch between all the toys. So, okay, I'm going to go through all these toys until I come to the end and I've played with all 100 and I've finished. The ones with the 4 go, well, I'll do this toy, then the next toy, and there's only 4. Oh, I've got to go back to the beginning. I've already used that toy before. Why don't I find a really creative way to make these toys into something else? Why don't I imagine in my head, hallucinate that this piece of wood is actually a telephone? And I'll get my brother and you'll be the student or I'll be the teacher and I'll make a phone call to an alien or whatever it's going to be, doesn't matter. The overstimulation is very important and not to do that. But, another one is connection. I'm writing a book at the moment for Simon & Schuster called Raising Resilient Children, doing all this research on this. And the connection between the adult and the child is the most important thing ever. So research will tell you this, that if you've connected with me as my mum and my dad, so I come home from school and instead of mum or dad, and this goes for teachers too, in fact, this goes for any adults, including you, Abby, you've got nieces and nephews, right? If you spend time connecting with the children in your care before you do anything else, then everything's a lot easier. Everything's a lot easier. And when I mean connect, I don't mean, say, hi, how are you? How's school? That's not good enough. They want you down on the floor, looking them in the eye at their eye level. They want you touching them, so shaking their hand. If you're a teacher, you're not going to go hugging the kids. It's completely against the rules. Shaking their hand at the door is good enough. If you're a parent, obviously it's very different. Tucking your kids in bed, holding them, hugging them, asking them questions, making plans for the future. All these things say to a child, you care about me. But more importantly, I matter to you. You're interested in my life. I matter to you. So as soon as you matter to me, now we trust each other, right? But more importantly, the child trusts you. So, for example, just shaking a child's hand at the door, your brain knows when your skin is touching skin. It knows my hand now is touching my own skin. It goes, that's skin. That's your own skin. But if I shake your hand, Abby, my brain goes, that's skin, but that's not your skin. It's somebody else's skin, right? Now, if you're touching somebody else's skin, you're pretty close to them. And if you're close to them, you probably trust them, right? Because why would you be so close and touching them for so long? Now you trust them, and I know you trust them. And as 2 of you instead of 1 of you, you're now safer. So because you're safer, I'm going to lower your heart rate. I'm going to lower your blood pressure. I'm going to flood your bloodstream with oxytocin, the love and the cuddle chemical. So now I'm ready to learn. But secondly, because I trust you, I now hear all of the words you say in a positive light. I see you as more beautiful, which doesn't really matter in this context, but that's a thing that happens. If you trust someone, you just see them more beautifully. They just look more attractive to you. And number 3, you learn from them. Every word that they say goes in. The brain's like, I trust them. They're my mentor. They're here to protect me. Learn from them. Do what they say. Listen to their words. But if you don't make that connection, if you just start going with the teaching, okay, I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you these facts, but there's no connection. Child goes, I don't trust you because I don't know you. And I don't matter to you because you haven't found anything out about me. You haven't met me at my eye level. You're not down on one knee, shaking my hand, saying good morning, asking about my new pet guinea pig. You haven't done any of that. And therefore, I don't matter to you, or I think I don't. Therefore, I don't trust you. Therefore, you're now less attractive. In fact, you're quite ugly, right? I don't like looking at you, number 1. Number 2, when you speak, it comes out negatively. Doesn't matter what you're saying. I just hear it with negative tone. And number 3, none of what you are saying is going in. I am not listening to you because I don't trust you. I do not want to learn from you. And so it's very important, that whole thing about before you start to do anything, You have to make that connection. You have to let them know you matter to me. There's a lot of research around this, and I'll finish just that part by saying this. In this research, there was a teacher who for 30 days at the door for 15 children, she shook their hand, got down on one knee. Hello, Abby, how are you? How's your pet guinea pig? I heard you got a new guinea pig. I'd love to see it one day. And children, oh my God, you matter. I matter to you. This is beautiful. But for 15 other children, she just said, in you go, get your books out, let's get going. Now, on the 30th day after doing that consistently with 15 and 15, she then went to teach the children. They all had brain receiving devices on their heads to look at their brain activity. What happened with the 15 kids who'd been connected? Their brains synchronized with her brain, like almost the same, like Bluetooth with my phone connected to my speaker. They almost had a cable just going straight in. Whatever she said, whatever she modeled, they just did it. It just went straight in like an intravenous drip right into the hippocampus. For the other 15, their brains were just off, basically pinpricks of light. So the evidence is there. Connection over curriculum. And it's just a fact. And you can't argue with it. Now you know it, you know it. And so there you go.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's this link between connection, trust, deeper learning. Where does resilience come into it?
Well, we talked earlier on about that risk. Okay. So what happens, generally speaking, is we want our children to be successful because it looks good to us as parents. My child got 100%, 10 out of 10, top of the class in the greatest school. Check it out. We're at a dinner party. By the way, Tommy's in the gifted and talented club. Did you hear about la, 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 la? Right. Same at school. In our schools, and when our children get 100%, grade A's, do really well, our school looks good. And we get to the top of the tally board to say, look at us, we're the best school in the county. And we attract more enrollments then. People want to come to our school because our school is getting really good results. But in that whole story there's no risk. And there's no risk, then there's no chance of it going wrong. Now, if you think about all the greatest minds in the world, Elon Musk, love him or hate him, he's now sending rockets up into the atmosphere, and these crazy, amazing rockets can land themselves and land on floating pods in the middle of the ocean. We've all seen them. It's like something out of a futuristic movie. But in order to land it, you have to crash 400 of them, in order to get it right. Look at anybody who's done anything. They've always made tons of mistakes. Look at Jeff Bezos, whether you like him or not, one of the most successful businessmen in the world. But before he built Amazon, he built Pets.com. Pets.com was $1 billion failure. I had to put it in the bin. And then he goes, well, I've learned from that. Let's build Amazon now. What happens with our children is, because we're always looking for 100% or grade A or everything right, we don't add that element of risk, and we don't promote failure as something that looks like success. That sounds really weird to say, paradoxical, but failure is success because they tried something new. And when you fail, we know what happens in the brain. Your brain goes, you failed, learn from it. Stick it in the hippocampus, you won't do that again, right? That's just the way it works because there's an emotion attached to it, there's a feeling there. And that's where resilience sits. It sits right there, okay? I failed, I overcame, I went again, and now I'm not going to give up. And so there you go. It was very, very easy. Don't try to make sure your children get it right every time. That's low-hanging fruit. It looks good when you get 100% or 10 out of 10. Actually, that's a failure completely. So there's always got to be that chance where children can get it wrong. They don't have to get it wrong, but there has to be that element of risk involved. And we miss that. And that's a bit of a shame.
Yes. Yeah, I guess that is it. Like, as a parent, you just want to protect your kids as much as you can and make sure that they're happy, make sure that they aren't stumbling over and falling and hurting themselves and making these mistakes, because that can make them sad, but actually it can help build their resilience.
It's not it can, it's it will.
It will.
100%, there's no question. If you look at, I don't know if you know what the PISA rankings are, but the PISA rankings are countries compared against each other for intelligence, right? So they have this, the OECD has a report every year, and they release the top most intelligent countries in the world. 2024 was Singapore, Macau, Taiwan, Japan, top 4, right? So you would think that they were the top 4 happiest countries in the world too, because they're the smartest, but they're not. In fact, suicide rates in some of those countries are astronomical. So grades do not equal happiness. Top of the class does not equal happiness. The top happiest countries in the world are Sweden, Iceland, Finland, and Denmark. What do they have that's very common? Freedom, trust, and choice. So it's very obvious. You want them to be happy? Don't aim for the top. Don't aim for the scores. Don't aim for the percentages. Give them freedom, give them choice, and trust them in the decisions they make. They're very smart, these kids. We underestimate how smart they are, and that's our failure in actual fact. So it's pretty amazing when we know, when you know, you can't go back now. Like when you listen to this podcast, you're like, ooh, I know that now. So I'm not going to, hopefully, not going to do those things. If you want your children to be happy, you want them to survive in this world, then you have to let them, build all those skills in a safe environment. And that safe environment is with you. It's not when they're 18, when they go out there, because, they need to have those skills before they do that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think that's great, because I think this is obviously a concern, like lack of resilience, lack of curiosity and creativity in our kids is such a concern for people. It's been brought up so many times
Sure.
over the last couple of weeks, just in my experience. But the good news is that as parents, or as the community surrounding these kids, we actually have the opportunity to create such a positive impact and to help them learn these skills so that they can work on these.
That's right.
Building that, yeah.
And you know what? It's not as easy as I make it sound. I'm a teacher 25 years, coming up to 30 years, right? So this is my thing. And, any teachers out there listening will also be like, that's their thing. But, 3 years ago, my co-founder and I, Richard Mills, we opened Upschool. So this, you said I'm the co-founder of Upschool. Just to explain what it is, basically a platform filled with courses for children, totally free. And all the parents here can go to it. And what it does is it guides your students, your children, a chance to learn what's normal learning: volcanoes, history, geography, science, whatever you want. And we've been to Antarctica, we've been to the North Pole, we've climbed Everest, we've been all over the place recording all of this content so children are inspired. But then what do? We give them choice. We say, now that you know this, what are you going to do about it? And we give them a choice, and they go away and they try one of these hands-on tactile things, which are differentiated by their, the scope in their community. And then they go away and they go for it. And if they fail, it's totally fine. But I tell you what, we've got more than 500,000 kids come to Upschool. And some of the stories that come back to us are just astounding. It's quite evident, and I'm going to Dubai next week to talk about this in a huge educational convention. It's quite evident that we underestimate their capabilities. One group of students in Delhi, they wanted to plant a forest. They did one of our courses called Be the Change, named after Gandhi, and they wanted to plant a forest because they hadn't seen a bird in their school grounds before. So the objective was, we want a bird to arrive. Now, that's pretty cool as just an objective. We want a bird to come to our school. How can we do it? So the course empowers them to make all these choices. So now they use literacy, and we teach them how to write these amazing, compelling, emotional letters. But we don't tell them who to write to or what to write. We just teach them the basics. They then wrote to a local minister and said, look, this is our plan. We've never seen a bird. We want to see a bird. And there's this land outside our school, and we want it. We want to plant a forest. Can you give it to us? He received 6,000 letters on his desk, handwritten, from kindergarten to year 12. So he said, okay, I'll give you half an acre right outside your school. It's yours. And he gifted it to the school. But the children then realized, oh my God, we have got so much power. If we can get a minister to give us land, just with pieces of paper and pens, could do anything. So they wrote to a local diamond dealer. His name was Nitin. And they wrote to him. They did all the research themselves. No one helped them. And they were like, we need $25,000 to plant 25,000 saplings outside our school so we can learn in shade. It's really hot here, but we also want a bird to come. We haven't seen a bird here before. He gave him 40 grand, right? Because he got 6,000 handwritten letters to his door. And he also needed that feeling, that purpose. He gave him 40 grand, and they bought 25,000 saplings. They called me and told me, look, this has happened. I was like, oh my God, this is insane. What's happening? I flew there on my way to England to stopover, and they let me plant the first sapling. Now, that was a year and a half ago. And they were planting all these saplings. Every child had 2 saplings each, and off they went. And I said to one of the 13-year-old girls there, how will you know when this project is a success? And she said, when the first bird comes, then we've succeeded. And she pointed up at the school window and said, look up there. And I looked up and there was a little boy and he was holding binoculars. And I said, what's that? She said, we've already started a bird watching club and we have a roster and we're just waiting for the first bird to arrive. And that was a year and a half ago. Now the birds have arrived already. You know, like within 2 weeks, insects were coming, and when insects come, birds come. So if you think about it like that, like when you give them the freedom to choose and say, look, the possibilities are endless. Kids are not like us. They don't have these boundaries of failure. They think they can do anything, and they can. But quite often we want them to succeed, so we lower the ceiling so they're guaranteed success. And that's our biggest failure. But yeah, for any parents or teachers who are like, ooh, that sounds good, I'd love to do something like that, then you can just go to upschool.co and there's just hundreds of courses waiting for them to do for free.
So good. And I'll put the link to Upschool in the show notes, as well as the link to your book, so people can investigate that a little bit more. But that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing such great insights, and also so many practical things that people can do for their kids, Gavin. I really appreciate it.
No, totally my pleasure. Yeah, I hope that some things resonate with your listeners, and thanks for having me. It's been lovely.
Yes, and if anyone wants to share how this has impacted or anything you've done out of this conversation, I'd love to hear it, and I'll pass it on with you, Gavin, as well. Cool. So I want to say, thank you to everyone who's tuned into Creativity Uncovered. If you enjoyed this episode, why not give us a quick rating on Apple or Spotify to help other people find and spark their creativity? And yes, please do reach out if this has sparked a little bit in you as well. Until next time, take care.
Thank you.
Yay. If you've made it this far, a huge thank you for your support and tuning into today's episode. Creativity Uncovered has been lovingly recorded on the land of the Cubby Cubby people, and we pay our respect to elders past, present, and emerging. This podcast has been produced by my amazing team here at Crisp Communications, and the music you just heard was composed by James Gatling. If you liked this episode, please do share it around and help us on our mission to unlock more creativity in this world. You can also hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episode releases.